Welcome to Cinema Science, where we dissect the science we see in movies. The Green Mile is a timeless story about a possibly centuries-old mysterious man with extraordinary empathic and healing abilities. The story leaves many questions unanswered. How old was he? His observations suggested experiences all over the world. Was he born on this continent? This cinematic masterpiece never won an Oscar, mainly because it premiered the same year as The Sixth Sense, which also deserved its Oscar. We'll discuss two topics in this video: that St. Christopher pendant which Paul took away before execution, and the worst UTI of Paul Edgecombe's life. One question frequently arises among modern viewers, accustomed to readily available antibiotics. Why didn't Paul Edgecombe simply see a doctor for his painful UTI? The answer is simple: he already had. His wife, Janet, insisted on a follow-up visit because his condition wasn't improving. While penicillin was discovered in 1928, its mass production significantly ramped up during World War II, particularly after becoming a strategic military asset. However, it was available in limited quantities before the war, though extremely difficult to obtain. In 1935, UTIs were far more dangerous than today. Currently, UTIs contribute to an estimated 13,000 deaths annually in the US, with a 10% mortality rate when they lead to bloodstream infections. UTIs were a significantly greater threat in 1935 due to the lack of readily available and effective antibiotics, and likely contributed to a much higher mortality rate. Paul's doctor likely prescribed sulfa drugs, like Penicillin, the first commercially available sulfa drug, a major breakthrough, advised plenty of fluids, and crucially, recommended prayer. Other antiseptics and supportive care were also used, though less effective. Paul might have encountered news of antibiotics in scientific publications or radio broadcasts, but upon his return visit, the doctor would have likely reiterated the same treatment: sulfa drugs, fluids, and fervent prayer. Sulfa drugs work by inhibiting bacterial growth by interfering with their ability to produce folic acid, essential for bacterial cell division. Treatment for UTIs in 1935 was primarily palliative, focusing on symptom relief rather than a cure. Options included bed rest, hydration, herbal remedies, pain relief, including narcotics, and in severe cases, catheterization. Drug-resistant infections were particularly perilous and often fatal. While sulfa drugs were available, widespread antibiotic resistance wasn't yet a major concern, though some resistance likely existed. These drugs were often effective against infections previously difficult to manage. However, Paul mentions this wasn't his first UTI, and it might have been a persistent infection misdiagnosed as a recurrence. Long-term sulfa drug courses weren't standard practice at the time. Completing antibiotic courses is now crucial to eradicate infection and prevent antibiotic resistance. Even today, we see resurgences of curable diseases like tuberculosis when treatment isn't completed. In 1935, the concept of antibiotic resistance was only just emerging. Widespread use and misuse of antibiotics, including penicillin, in later decades, led to the resistance problems we face today. Paul faced the grim realities of potential remission, prolonged suffering, or even death. The doctor could give little comfort. All the doctor could offer was hope. Some people say that hope is just the flip side of worry. I hope I get better versus I hope I don't get gangrene and lose body parts. Paul walked around, likely visualizing himself rotting inside, and he was. Another dose of sulfa drugs, which had already failed with this infection, was little more than another dose of worry, something Paul already had in abundance at home. Ultimately, John empathized with Paul's pain, likely sensing it across the cell block, especially during their handshake. John got to know Paul's whole life in deeds and memories, and knew that he was a kind and compassionate man, all in that handshake. There was hope in John's eyes after the handshake. This handshake may have been an attempt to heal Paul and alleviate his suffering. In the movie, at Hal's house, John appears almost desperate to help, unable to stop himself, even when Hal threatened to shoot. The removal of the metal pendant is more symbolic than practical, as it's unlikely to interfere with electrocution. It offered no safety for anyone in the room, not even John. It's difficult to imagine what Paul was trying to prevent here. A silver pendant on its own wouldn't have significant capacitance or the ability to store charge. Neither does John's body. There was no danger of a residual charge harming the guards after the execution. Even if it were exposed to an electric field, without the necessary components like a dielectric layer and structured conductive surfaces, a silver pendant wouldn't act as a capacitor. There was no danger of the silver heating up or burning John. John was indeed going to be burned wherever the electrodes touched him, but the pendant was not the anode or the cathode during the execution. Thinking of electricity as water flowing through a pipe, the anode is the source of the electrical current, and the cathode is the exit point. Silver is an excellent conductor of electricity, which means it can carry electric currents effectively without significant resistance, similar to how a wet sponge conducts electricity, as pointed out in the movie. In 1935, John Coffey's buttons and hooks for his overalls were made of brass, an alloy of copper and zinc, and so was his zipper. Just saying. But electricity was not flowing through the pendant or anything that John was wearing. It was flowing through John's head and legs. The silver could conduct the current quickly, but because of its low resistance, it wouldn't generate a lot of heat. Heating typically occurs in materials with higher resistance, where electrical energy is converted to heat. Perhaps the author thought of MRIs, which certainly did not exist in 1935, where that pendant and chain could possibly heat up. But overall, a silver pendant would not fly across the room because it's not ferromagnetic, store any current, nor heat up because it lacks the necessary components and conditions for such behaviors in an electrocution. The author may have assumed it was necessary due to common misconceptions about electricity and metal. This act may have also served to heighten drama and showcase Paul's meticulous nature, adding to the narrative and emotional impact of the scene. How would you have liked this movie to end? Besides his long life, did Paul have any other abilities? What was John Coffey's lineage? Did he have children, perhaps hundreds over time? Would you be interested in a story about a descendant of John Coffey, or even an origin story for John, set possibly thousands of years ago, continents away, spanning centuries, with John remembering little but the pain and cruelty he's witnessed? It's been 25 years, but I'm game for a sequel or a prequel. How about you?